Let's get to the story of the day. I was a 31-year-old married mother of 4 at the time of my incident. We were a healthy, energetic family who had just returned from a trip. The new school year was about to start. Carts or paddles were not summoned in my experience. It went off without a hitch. My infection started with a scratchy throat and a high fever, which was followed by doctor visits and hospitalization. I gradually felt weaker, with difficulty speaking and no appetite. I need to speak to someone. I don't think I'm getting out of here, I finally told the nurse one day. We don't want to hear that type of discourse around here, she said, and exited. Geez, I thought to myself. I listen if I ever get out of this bed. The doctor was visiting twice a day, but things were different one morning. I was overcome with great and overwhelming despair. At this point, I could only move my head. He stayed and requested me to concentrate on his words. He began recounting a narrative, and I tried to pay attention at first, but it was exhausting. I could hear his voice, but the words were muddled. I relaxed, and then I found myself on the ceiling. It was quick and smooth. Now, I could plainly hear his remarks and understand what he was saying. Oh, I used to have a nightgown just like that, I think, as I stared down at the woman laying in bed. While standing there observing, I saw a bald area on the back of the doctor's head. He was sobbing and leaned against the bed rail. Then I realized what was going on. This can't be good if I'm up here and she's down there. Simultaneously, I realized that my grief has subsided and my sense of humor has returned. I wanted to tell him that I was fine, but I was already speeding down the corridor and ended up at the nurse's station. The nurses were joking around when one of them screamed out, "Today's theme is Chinese food. You already know what to do. Put your money in and make a list of things you desire. Pronto." She was waving an envelope in front of her face. Following that, I found myself inside a phone booth built into the hallway wall. My spouse was speaking with my best buddy on the phone. He was informing her of what was going on. She replied, and I would be in her office in North Carolina. I'd be back in the phone booth when he spoke. This went on for a while, and I could see the alterations she'd made to her office decor. Following that, I found myself in a vast theater with a stage and velvet curtains on both sides. There was no one else present. I was seated in the center of the row. I had no idea how or why I had arrived. I waited, and then one of my very first childhood buddies appeared on stage. She smiled at me and told me how much she enjoyed the games we played and the laughter we shared. Then it was my time to tell her how much fun I always had with them, but how I was sorry when they moved away. We stayed till we had expressed our love and admiration for one another. This section moved at a significantly slower pace. A young child from my neighborhood emerged. I thanked him for showing me how to tie my laces, and he told me how much he enjoyed our running races. I was having a great time with everything. I knew who would appear next, but it always ended with giving and receiving love. Later, an older boy appears. He worked as a bus monitor. He told me that I had made him feel humiliated. I paid attention to him. He used to pick on my brother. So one day, I took his book bag and placed it by the side of the house at the bus stop. The youngsters were all having fun. When the bus arrived, the youngsters formed a queue and boarded. He couldn't find his suitcase when it was his turn. "Not funny," he says to the kids. They yank on the window latches and lower their windows. He asked the others where his suitcase was, and they informed him. He was soon walking towards the bus, and the youngsters were mocking him. I had to enter his body and feel the shame he felt as he looked out the windows. He needed to get into mine and comprehend what I was going through. I had to send him my love and apologized profusely. He bestowed great kindness on me. We both felt understood and appreciated after this conversation. I can't express how profound the healing was. There were numerous other exchanges. I found myself in a tunnel, speeding towards a brilliant light, and I thought to myself, "Oh, I'm coming home today." When I reached the light, there is a distinct edge, and it is evident that this is where I will stop. There were no faces or figures, just tiny light beams that moved slightly, making up this larger light. They informed me that my ancestors had come to greet me today, but that my grandma had intervened. "Oh, my grandma," I thought, and they say, "No, not that one. You've never met this one." That's when I realized they knew everything. You're only here for a short time. You can't stay. You agreed to help others and children while earning your PhD. You've got me muddled up with someone else. School was difficult for me, I responded. That was then, I hear back. I knew they had all the answers at that point. I wanted to ask some inquiries. Simply my luck. I get into a position like this, and the only question I have is, why can't I just stay? Do you recall when my body stopped working? I know I was there for long, but all I remember is that they talked about race and countries to keep people apart. They took me to a vast room with people lying on tables and large cylinders hanging above them. No surgery will be performed. Light and vibration will repair their organs. I suddenly realized it was time for me to leave. How do I return? I inquired. Just go left, they say. And I wonder, how is that going to happen? Because I always make an L for left. There aren't any mistakes, I hear. With that, I'm now in my kitchen at home. My twins are in high chairs, and my older kid is at the table. My mother is with them. I get the message that this is where I need to be, and I find myself back in the hospital bed. I couldn't move anything, but I could hear. I tried to open my eyelids, wriggle my toes, but nothing worked. Why are you so sad? A woman's voice asks shortly after, and it was my doctor who responded. We lost the young mom today, he said. I feel an icy hand on my neck all of a sudden. I'm not sure what you're on about. I have a heartbeat. I started my recovery process. I was hospitalized for almost a month. Do you ever order Chinese food? I asked one of the nurses before I left. Each payday, honey, she says. I told her the date and asked if she wanted to go check it out. If it matters to you. She returned later and affirmed, yes, it was payday that day. Months later, I went to a wallpaper store and rummaged through the books until I found the perfect wallpaper for my friend's office. I requested a sample from the woman. Today's your fortunate day. Take the entire page. Our new books will be arriving soon. I sealed it in an envelope and brought it with me on my next trip. It was an ideal match. I summoned the bravery to phone the doctor's office and request a consultation. I explained to him that odd things had happened to me that day that I couldn't understand. He stated that he was unsurprised. You were gone, he started. I've been doing this for a long time. I had 2 other patients with the same condition as you, an 11-year-old child and a young woman. They both passed. I never said it to anyone. I was getting ready for dinner about 3 years later when I turned on Oprah. You're going to enjoy today's show, people. We have a young man here today who went skydiving and has come to tell us what occurred. He'll tell us about what they call a near-death experience. The validation was just as crucial as the encounter itself. It was the rocket fuel I required to start making changes in my life.